Good morning to you, Honorable Minister Halkitis, and thank you for agreeing to have this discussion with me on the Bahamas reform agenda towards an economic recovery.
Thank you very much. Good morning. It's nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, and thank you as well to our audience for joining us today. Before we begin, Minister, I just want to first congratulate your government for publishing the Fiscal Strategy report and the medium-term debt management report, both of which are available online and both of which I feel represent a very transparent and straightforward fiscal picture and reform agenda. And I especially want to thank and congratulate all of the policymakers in the Bahamas, whichever side they belong to, for taking the initiative to enact the fiscal responsibility legislation, as I call it, and for honoring its mandate. Yours is the only sovereign nation I know of in this region that has taken these measures in the absence of an IMF program. So congratulations to your country, Honorable Minister. I do hope that every Bahamian, every investor in the Bahamas, and all interested parties will have a look at those two documents, your Fiscal Strategy report and your medium-term debt management report.
Well, thank you very much. We think it's very important, particularly as a new administration, to demonstrate that continuity. Of course, the fiscal responsibility legislation was enacted by the previous administration, but we felt it important as a demonstration to the international community, to Bahamians, to investors and analysts, to demonstrate our commitment to the tenets of fiscal responsibility and prudent management, to continue the publication, and as we go along, even to look at ways that we can improve the presentation of the information as we get feedback from our consumers, what other aspects we might need to include so that they can get a true picture of the state of affairs in the Bahamas.
Great, and congratulations for that as well. So, Minister, let's get into the discussion now around the macroeconomy in the Bahamas and the fiscal picture as well. And let's talk about the debt level. We have about 100% of GDP, right, is your current debt level. And almost half of that is US dollar denominated debt. As well, there is a primary fiscal deficit, which is a strong indication that the level of debt is unsustainable. And just to clarify, a primary fiscal deficit means that you're already in deficit before you honor the interest on your existing debt, which means you are borrowing to pay the interest on your existing debt. And that is a clear indication that the level of debt that you're carrying is unsustainable. Please, can you share with us your government's plan to finance this year's fiscal deficit?
Yes, and I would just preface my answer by saying that being a small open economy heavily dependent on tourism, we were severely impacted, firstly by Hurricane Dorian and then the COVID pandemic, where international travel basically ceased for a prolonged period of time. And so the government of the Bahamas incurred a lot of debt to support the economy. Having said that, we realize that this situation is unsustainable. The additions to the level of debt that has gone on over the past 2 years is unsustainable. And you are quite correct. And here in the Bahamas, when the debt to GDP ratio hit 100%, which is a milestone and a not pleasant milestone, I think it got the attention of a lot of the public. It definitely got the attention of policymakers, and the resolve to address the situation was hardened. In the current situation, what we do now as part of our reporting is that we publish an annual borrowing strategy where we lay out in detail how we intend to finance the deficit over this budget period. So that has been published. And you are quite correct. 44% of our debt is now denominated in foreign currency, mostly US dollars. We have seen that increase as well as a result of the pandemic, and we want to see that move back towards the level of anywhere from 25 to 30% over time. In terms of this current fiscal year, we intend to, in the domestic market, we will finance with refinancing of bonds and the issuance of new bonds as required, loans from domestic financial institutions. On the international side, we have not, because of market conditions, we have not yet gone to the international bond market. So we have relied on loans from financial institutions, drawdowns from some loans from some of the multilateral organizations. And we expect to go to the bond market later on in this fiscal year, which ends July 1st. Happily, I can say, due to the opening of the economy and some good indications of economic strength so far, our borrowing requirement might come in at about $160 million less than we originally forecast. But suffice it to say, we recognize the issue, and we are addressing it, firstly in terms of publishing the borrowing plan, which lays out the plan, and our medium-term debt management strategy, which indicates how we intend to manage the debt over the next 3 years.
Right, and yes, thanks for highlighting that. And you mentioned multilateral debt, and I did note in one of my reports that the World Bank also gave the Government of the Bahamas some liquidity support, which is very unusual for the World Bank to do for a country of your income level, but it's testament to the support that your government and your country is receiving from the international financial community and the development banks, and also testament to the crisis that your country is facing. Those two double whammies you mentioned is unprecedented, and so this is the time when you need the most help and support. So
that's correct.
Exactly, and I think that was important to highlight. Tell me, what are the major takeaways, if you will, from those two reports that I outlined and highlighted earlier, the Fiscal Strategy report and your medium-term debt management report? If you can give me the major highlights of those and how these specifically address the fact that you have deteriorating creditworthiness in the Bahamas. You've had one downgrade after the next, and that sends a huge negative signal to the international investing community, and it also affects your reputation and morale and all kinds of things. So tell me what these reports contain that will support this.
There is no doubt that downgrades affects morale. I never knew until I became involved in public policy how much individuals actually watch those things. And I think that is a good thing, because it also imposes a sort of discipline on policymakers. But to your question, the main takeaway from the Fiscal Strategy report, which outlines our strategy for managing the economy over the next 3 years, is that we want to approach a balanced recurrent budget by the year 2025. The main way that we intend to do that is we are targeting an improvement of our revenue to GDP ratio from its current level of around 19% to 25% by 2024-25. How do we intend to do that? Number one, the economy is opening. We were on a virtual lockdown for most of 2020, and for severe restrictions on economic activity throughout 2021. Towards the end of the year, we've had a gradual opening of the economy, and so we've seen our revenues improve because of that opening of the economy. A second very, very important policy initiative is the formation of something we call here a revenue enhancement unit within our Department of Inland Revenue. And so we have, with the assistance of some international consultants and advisors, we have established a unit whose main priority is to address areas of revenue administration, revenue leakage, to identify where there are possibilities for doing audits and ensuring that the government revenue is secured and the integrity of the revenue system is preserved. So ensuring basically, and I always have to say this, not hounding your everyday taxpayer, but ensuring that those who have tax obligations who can afford to pay are assessed properly. Where they have any objection, they can have their objections heard, but ensuring that the integrity of the system is preserved. Another highlight of the Fiscal Strategy report is we want to move our debt to GDP ratio more towards the 50% range by the year 2030, 2031. And we will achieve that by improvements in the revenue, both in the administration and the revenue performance coming out of an improved economy, and containment of expenditure. We expect, for example, that as we move more and more, and we are hopeful that signs are positive, and we're hopeful that COVID-19 is in our rearview mirror, and as the economy opens up and hopefully strengthens, not only are we generating more revenue, but the COVID-related spending in terms of the enhanced levels of social intervention that had to be undertaken, the additional investments in terms of health care and caring for those who were ill. As those recede, we have on the revenue side, the economy is improving, the revenue is being generated, and naturally, some of the heightened spending for COVID-related expenses falls away, and we are also able to, put in place measures to do things like eliminate waste and make sure the government is getting value for money on its spending. In terms of the medium-term debt management strategy, the overall objective, as I said, is we want to move towards 50%, back towards 50% of GDP for our debt by the year 2030, 2031. It's ambitious, but we believe that it's necessary for us to rebuild that headroom that we enjoyed previous to the hurricanes and the pandemic, so that in the event of other shocks to the economy, we'll have that room to respond. Another important element, I should say, is that in conjunction with our annual borrowing plan, our medium-term debt strategy, we have appointed a private sector debt advisory committee. And this is made up of individuals from the private sector. The chairman is our former Minister of State for Finance, who's also a former governor of the Central Bank of the Bahamas, the Honorable James Smith, well-respected throughout the country and throughout the region, and other private sector professionals who their role is to work along with the debt management unit of the government and to give a different perspective, a private sector perspective, so that they can help to guide us in our debt management. So those are the main highlights, and we think that that's a good strategy. And of course, we always monitor and we make adjustments as we go along.
Thanks for sharing that, Minister. And I was especially encouraged when I saw that you were getting private sector involvement. This is a model that worked well in Jamaica when they had their crisis, maybe back in 2011 or so. And you do need private sector support. And as you say, different perspectives, all hands on deck, right? That's what we need right now.
Exactly. And I should say that this is a private sector advisory committee made up of senior individuals, well-placed individuals throughout the financial services community. And so this is in no way a rubber stamp or individuals made up of individuals who will just toe the line, so to speak. We genuinely expect to get objective advice and input from this group.
Good, good. Happy to hear that. And you spoke about enhanced tax administration, which of course we know is very critical because we have lots of leakage all over this region. Yes. Even though you don't have a corporate tax and you don't have a personal income tax, there is VAT. Your VAT is actually the most efficient VAT in the region. But I imagine there is some room to tighten up, not just the VAT, but your other taxes, your indirect taxes, and so on. But I want to switch and talk a little bit about the global minimum tax of 15% that your country and 100 and something other countries have signed on to. in 10 years, I believe, or 9 years now, to implement this global minimum tax on multinational corporations as it relates to the income that they generate, over 750 million in your country. Tell me how the Bahamas plans to handle this. I know it's a ways off, but also, is it something that you plan? I know there's been talk in the past of corporate tax being implemented in the Bahamas. And is this going to signal that kind of a tax reform? How is this going to work in the Bahamas?
Well, as you said, we, along with, I think it was 130 countries, signed on to this proposal. And so one of the first things that we're doing is we have commissioned an international accounting firm to look at our entire taxation system, both offshore and onshore, and to give us a report, which we expect by the end of this fiscal year, which is June 30th, give us a report on the potential impacts on both our international financial services economy as well as the domestic economy of an imposition of a 15% tax. Once we get the report, we will digest it, share it with stakeholders. We have invited members of the private sector, once again, from throughout the economy, from financial services, Chamber of Commerce, civil society, other private sector groups, to sit in on a committee to look at this question. And so, first order of business, we get the research, we digest it, we disseminate it amongst the stakeholders, have a discussion, and come to a conclusion on the best way forward. We think that this collaborative approach, you spoke of our efficient VAT. A part of that was while we were implementing, we had a very, very long and detailed collaboration, and we intend to do the same thing with this global minimum tax. So the first order of business, get the study, see what the potential impacts are, speak to the stakeholders, and get their buy-in on any action that we then decide. But you are quite correct. Even domestically, there has been for a long time a discussion. We don't have a corporate tax, so to speak. We have a business license fee. Right. We don't call it a tax. We call it a fee. And there has been discussion of over a long time amongst those companies, particularly those who might have low gross margins, because we tax on the business license fee on the gross turnover. Some segments think that's unfair and that we should move to more of a corporate tax. And that is a discussion that we will continue to have, and I think that will be intensified in this discussion about this global minimum tax. So suffice it to say, we want any action we take to be data-driven and research-driven, and secondly, ensure that we have the greatest buy-in possible on any action that we take from all stakeholders.
Good. That cross-cutting involvement and buy-in always helps with the implementation, because execution and implementation is always the most difficult part and something we have a real challenge with in this region.
Yes. And we find that once you give people a meaningful opportunity to have input, and they recognize and they realize that their input is being considered, then when you get to the point of implementation, there is less resistance and things go much more smoothly.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about growth, because the only way you're going to move your debt to GDP in a short space of time till 2030, you have from 100% to 50%. Yes, we talked about the numerator, the revenue measures and the tax administration measures. But we need to talk about the denominator, which is the GDP, which means we have to grow that denominator. We have to grow the economy in order to bring down the debt to GDP, but also to get the Bahamas economy back where it used to be and beyond, for the better welfare of all your residents. So tell me what your government's plans are to drive growth, to drive job creation. And when I say that, I want to specify that I believe in private sector-led growth and economic activity, as opposed to the government just pumping money, thinking that this sort of Keynesian approach is what's going to work when really it does not work in our economies because it just drives imports. So tell me what your government is going to do to drive private sector-led growth and job creation.
Thank you very much. Very good question. We have been in a sort of slog of low to negative growth for many years, going back to
many of us in this region are with you, so it's not you alone. Yeah.
So the negative growth are very, very slow. Now, coming off the pandemic, the most important thing for us is to be able to deal with continue to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic, continue to open the economy in a responsible way. That has had some impacts as well. We are an economy driven largely by foreign direct investment. And so one of the first things we have done is foreign direct investment comes before our National Economic Council. We have reformed the way that they operate. They now meet weekly instead of almost in an ad hoc manner as had been in the past. So there's a weekly meeting of the National Economic Council where foreign direct investment proposals are considered. Those that are approved, we want to approve them quickly so that they can get to the point of all the other environmental approvals, et cetera, and get shovels in the ground. So part of the ease of doing business, making sure that you don't have people who want to come here and invest money stuck in a pipeline, so to speak. So we've reformed the way that they operate. We are also continuing our investment in the small and medium-sized sector. We have a small business development center. As a matter of fact, just yesterday, the new board was installed, and their job is to make sure that financing, support, mentorship, any number of support initiatives are made available to the small business sector in the country. In my charge to them, I asked them to make sure that they look at the underserved, those individuals who might want to be entrepreneurs, but traditionally they do not have access to something like a small business development center, and as well have asked them to make sure that their impact is felt in the Family Islands as well. We have a digitization project that is financed by the IDB. We believe we digitize more government services, more people interact and get their services from the government online. That greases the wheel of commerce and make things move along much more smoothly as well. Over the longer term, we are looking into a transformation to more renewables in terms of energy generation. We, as I'm sure, a lot of people are now looking at the whole issue now of carbon credits and how we can potentially monetize those, and we are in the early stages of that. And many years ago, we developed what we call a national development plan, which looked at the Bahamas in its entirety, all of the islands, the potential of the different islands to be developed, and what can happen, what public investment, for example, needs to happen in these islands to spur their economic growth. So diversification of the economy more out of the capital and towards our Family Islands, which are each unique and have a lot to offer. So those are some of the things that we're doing. It's important that the economy is open and it can be done safely. Make it easier for people to do business. I spoke about the National Economic Council, but we also are smoothing the path for Bahamians who want to invest and reducing red tape and bureaucracy so that they can get on with their investment. And so those are some of the things that we are doing. In addition, financial services. How could I forget financial services, which has taken a battering over the past 20 years. But what we have learned is that individuals practicing in the industry, they have evolved. And so they are offering new services, things like fintech and even crypto exchanges, digital assets. And so we are aware, we have a good digital asset legislation and regulatory regime. And so we are also on alert to make sure that we remain attractive for financial services and different niches within the financial services industry. And so we are optimistic. We are cautiously optimistic. I always say cautiously optimistic because we've seen some positive signs in the economy where we're beginning to approach pre-COVID-19 levels. And it's just up to us to continue to work hard and be vigilant and keep COVID under control so that our economy continues to thrive.
Good. Thanks, Minister. Very, very happy to hear about this weekly meeting for your National Economic Committee and also the digitization. That's critical to getting that ease of doing business going. All of what we've discussed, the fiscal reforms, your medium-term debt strategy, and your targets as it relates to your debt, how you're going to get there in terms of your revenue administration and tightening that up, and all of your ease of doing business reforms and others as it relates to growing the economy. All of these are very important issues and information that people really need to know, because this is how you drive this recovery. Not just doing this hard work, but also people need to know and people need to understand so that they can also adjust how they plan to do their business. How are you going to address the communication of all of these important reforms that you've just outlined for me? Because this is something that your investors need to hear. This is something the people of the Bahamas need to hear. The banks need to hear. The rating agencies need to hear. All of these stakeholders need to hear all of this important stuff.
Well, again, excellent question. When we came in, and we recognize that, we owe it firstly to our people to report to them, let them know what we're doing, because they are our bosses, and we owe it to investors and observers and rating agencies because they're all stakeholders. And when the administration came in September of last year, we began a round of communication with investors and the rating agencies and the multilaterals, the IMF, the World Bank, the IDB, to give them, an update, an assessment of our philosophy, to reassure them that we are, as an administration, committed to all the tenets of fiscal prudence and transparency and openness. And we did that. And so we also work in communication with our domestic financial institutions to share the same message to them and let them know what our, reassure them of our philosophy and apprise them of our plans. Going forward, now we need to take a more public communication step in terms of intentional communications going out on a sustained periodic basis to give updates on our strategy, answer questions, and take information and take advice and perhaps be able to absorb that into our strategy. So going forward, I'm hoping that we can have many more conversations like this, and you will see much more of us speaking to the public, specifically to these issues, because as I said earlier, financial issues, particularly when you hit certain milestones like 100% debt to GDP, the public, or downgrades, the public, you realize that the public is paying attention. So it's on us to communicate. And so part of our strategy will be, we also have a weekly press briefing by the Office of the Prime Minister that we participate in from time to time. But we recognize that we have an international audience. We have a regional audience and we have an international audience. So we will be seeking ways and using different pathways to get our message out. And I hope this is a start of hopefully a regular conversation that we can have so that our regional and international partners can get an idea of an understanding of what we're doing.
Well, Minister, I'm always happy to support you, and I always draw reference to Jamaica's example of their Economic Growth Council and their Economic Policy Oversight Committee that comes to the public on a quarterly basis and says, this is what we said we would do for this quarter or this year gone by. This is what we've actually achieved. This is what we haven't achieved, and this is why, and this is what we're going to do going forward. It gives not
Yes.
just a picture of where things are and where they're going, but it drives accountability and transparency.
Yes.
And those two elements are extremely important in building trust and building confidence in the plan that you have, in the recovery plan. Having that recovery plan in isolation and all of you guys sitting in a room working hard is not good enough anymore. Yeah, your people need to know. And I'm happy to support you in any way I can, Minister, to make that happen.
Thank you very much for having me.
Good. And to all of the people of the Bahamas and all of our audience members, thank you so much for watching. And we look forward to many more of these discussions. Thank you. Stay safe.